So far, that's all in 1799, but that again is the publication date, probably maybe 10 years before or something. But that's, I think, sorry. Okay. I think part of the problem is that people just haven't been looking. So it is always possible to find another reference. One of the things I try to indicate, and Bobby, you wrote this too, so why don't you go ahead and answer that?
Because some people claim Rohingya identities are just invented, but I understand that word or the name is in their community, because that's why I think in 1950s when the identity remarked again in the Burmese press, we would not have read that old book. I think so. I think it's a kind of authentic identity in the region, and but. For the book they're mentioning, I think it might be quite correct, according to that time, because he mentioned even mentioned in the vocabulary book, he even mentioned some words of the Rohingya, and it translates with the English text. So I think it's quite authentic.
If I could just add one more comment, is one of the points I was trying to make is just that the same type of historical inquiry is not directed at both communities. The default assumption is that the Rakhine Buddhists are indigenous, and nobody ever questions, well, when do we actually have evidence of the Rakhine Buddhist identities? So that's where it's been unfair. And so if there's no reference to Rakhine Buddhists in such an area, we just assume, okay, yeah, they were always there. But unless the Rohingya actually have a die-hard, dry, unquestionable source, then we date it from that time. But even when you do find such a source, it's still denied. So that's one of the problems we have here.
Another thing is that for that, another thing mentioned here is that when when people claiming about the Rohingya identity formation, there's most of your kind sources say they only invented in 1951 in Guardian magazine, but I could not find any evidence. 1951. Some sources say this 1961. They invented in 1961 Guardian magazine, but you already used it in 1954, maybe earlier, might be earlier. So it's a kind of inconsistency and defending from the Yakan side.
I just wanted to thank especially to our PhD candidate, Dr. Bobo, because there's an awareness is going on, but the awareness especially coming from the Burmese people inside the Burma, especially like Dr. Charney, if you can have more voices from Burma, it's a very powerful voices for us, and I hope we will see in future more of them. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you again for your presentation. So I just, to almost play the devil's advocate, why do you think when the British conducted census, the India census as part of Myanmar, and the last one I believe was 1931, which is House in Boston, I've been through it, why did they not mention the Rohingya anymore? Why do you think that was a conscious decision? Because it has had profound downstream effects.
Well, what I would probably say is a lot of the problem we have with the census material is often what has come out of the people who actually did the data collection. So one of the things we have for Arakan, for example, is we really don't know what the different historical censuses going back to the 1867 to 71 and so on every 10 years, is we don't actually know what the real population figures were, how many people were Muslim, how many were Buddhist, because they would ask like a local chief or a local headman, what's the population? Say, oh, everybody's terrified of Buddhists. Or this. And they would ask this person, well, what is population? Oh, whatever his assumptions were, terminologies and so on. So these censuses in that sense weren't scientific. I don't know why they would not mention Rohingya. All I've tried to point out in this case, because I'm not a Rohingya researcher, I work on Arakan per se, is that, well, if we do look back, we do have this concrete source that goes before the British period.
So in one source in Arakan, about Kazatia in Arakan region, in 1901, the population of the non-indigenous races, it's said in one source, one ethnic type called Sheikh, S-H-A-I-K-H-S, Sheikhs, reach over 152,000 people, but nobody knows what is Sheikh in that period. So this kind of identity, you know.
What year was that? Sheikh.
S-H-A.
What years?
1901. Yeah, S-H-A-K-H-S, Sheikhs. So census or, you know, Gazetteer, they are just a colonial, official office.
In that case, they would be using what the British would have misreferred to as a Muslim caste name.
Yes, Muslim caste name. So nobody knows that what is Sheikhs. So.
Thank you.
Penny? Is it not coming?
I've got quite a loud voice.
Should be okay. Amanda, are you getting the sound stream from the audience?
Well, my question is, to what extent does it matter to locate a long, long history of Rohingya existence inside the territory that is now Myanmar? If, for example, you had an immigrant population that arrived in the 1960s and were being persecuted in exactly the same way as the Rohingya are now being persecuted, what we would call a genocide, would we act any differently? And I'm just interested in how you, because I mean, you're historians, and I think it's really important the work that you've done. But I do have a question about how much we should concern ourselves with, if we establish that the Rohingya were an indigenous population, that they have a sort of continuing presence since, let's say, the 16th century, does that make any appreciable difference, in fact, to what is happening to the Rohingya now?
For me, no. And in terms of international standards, no. But one of the reasons it's so important to show the Rohingya were there before 1824 is because of the citizenship laws that were put in place, which identify who are indigenous races and who aren't. So if you can be shown to, your origins can be shown to have come after the introduction of British rule, then you are an indigenous country and really shouldn't play any part in, in its future destiny. So one of the reasons it's so important to show this is to work it out through what Myanmar's national standards. It's not for me to say whether that should be the case or not.
I suppose that the follow-up question then is that the Kaman, we know, have also been persecuted, and increasingly Muslims more generally in the country are being persecuted. So the question of citizenship might be considered to be something of a red herring.
Yeah. Do you want to say something?
So not only Rohingya people, there are at least 2 other ethnic tribes. They had to claim for the native or indigenous status in Burma. At least I remember one is Kokan, that's a kind of Chinese tribe, people in Shan State, and another one is Lushai, kind of Chen people. I remember Kokan got it they could negotiate with the Brunei's government in 1950s, mid-50s, so they can claim as Dayanda indigenous people. And then Lushai was quite late. They only got a recognition only in the mid-60s. Before that, there's the Lushan rebellion in Burma. Because of these people, Lushan are also living in the India, Mizoram state. So many things are happening in the early post-independence period in Burma.
We should also point out that the Kaman do show up in Rakhine Burmese language sources way back, so they would not be jeopardized in this particular way. They would be demonstrated to go back further than that. That's the way
Jennifer, you will be the last questioner.
Okay, well, thank you very much to the panel. I think I was reflecting on there's the differences and similarities between the Rohingya and other genocides. It seems to me that the failure by the state to recognise Rohingya as a people is quite a significant difference. So in other genocides, people are still recognised. Jews are still recognised as Jews. They might have their citizenship taken away, but they're still Jews. They're outside, they're excluded from the state, but they still have their identity. Rohingya are excluded, but they don't have their identity. They're no longer Rohingya. They're all these other things. So I do wonder, I guess maybe this is following on from Penny's, is if we are locating some of the argument in the documents of the state, why do we look there? If we think about genocide as destruction of a people, and very much it's about the self-identity of that people, should we not be looking to the documentation and the tradition and the practices of that people? So I guess my question, and a comment and a question to Doris, I mean, are there practices and I guess not documentation, but in terms of self-identity of Rohingya, is this what we can present? Is this, well, we exist. It's not that we don't exist. We exist. We have these practices. We have been a people for this time. The state's documentation, the state's decisions, the state's taking away citizenship, giving citizenship to the state can change over time. But it's the people and their self-identity, and that we exist. As you say, we exist. This is who we are. So this is my question and my comment. Is that where we should possibly be looking and putting that forward rather than the kind of the vagaries of the state? I understand the kind of historical work you're doing, and it's very, very critical. It's part of what we need to do. And we do that in conjunction with the Rohingya community and the practices and like self-identity of this is who we are as a people.
Let me take one more question, because I've been overpowered by Quintana, Mr. Quintana.
Yeah, thank you. Well, this is also a question connected to this. Jennifer's also comment. While being a reporter in Myanmar back in 2008, in my discussions with the governments, they were not denying the word Rohingyas. They were not saying, no, we do not recognize Rohingyas. Of course, they said, I mean, they are not indigenous people, they are not ethnic groups of Myanmar, but we could discuss about Rohingyas. And this has started to change quite recently. So this is my comment, and the question will be, you're looking into the past, but don't you think it is also important to check on where this policy of the government, the military government, now apparently the NLD government as well, in respect to the naming of this community, and to document where this policy is going, when exactly started, and where it is heading, this policy.
Okay. 1 minute, whoever wants to take a shot, and then we have to close it.
Okay. As a historian, I look back into far further into the murkier depths of the past. And leave this type of question to the social scientists, but this has a lot to do with the particular nature, the template for the nation that the military has put in place for the transition of power and to keep itself in place. And I think the answer lies there. In my History of Modern Burma last chapter, I named Perpetual Delay because it looked like the military would hold on forever. With Aung San Suu Kyi coming to place and these recent decisions, I would say I would not change the name of that chapter, and that chapter is not finished yet.
Yes. For the documentation, I think in Burma it's only in 1950s, late 50s, that started anthropological survey and by the state. And because most ethnic people, they could not access the literacy, so they could only only invented the scripts writings in 1960s. So it's quite kind of insufficient to collect their data. And another thing is the civil war happening in the all Burmese ethnic states. So it's quite difficult to get documents from all these areas. So there's another thing.
Thank you very much. Let's give them a round of applause.